Good afternoon, people. I'm going to be doing a presentation based on consumer device and the security around consumer devices, which is basically getting me a little bit mad these days. So I'm Mattrix on Twitter. I'm a principal consultant for Optiv. I was supposed to have a co-presenter today, and that would have been David Khudaverdyan. He basically was a lot of the technical information in regard to the talk. Myself, I've been practicing information security for quite some time, and I kind of needed to get some of his techniques in here, so it was just natural that I teamed up with him and actually gave the talk with him, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So basically, this talk is about consumer devices. It originally started with me just talking about, what's the difference between the privacy of iOS and Android? But it seems that they've gone ahead and mucked around, specifically with our devices all the way down to our computers. Computer OSs are no longer exactly the way that they used to be, which are pretty dedicated to just running the programs that are on it. No, they've gone ahead and added cool things like the cloud on it. And the sad part is all these mobile OSs and the actual OSs on your hardware are just becoming more invasive by default. So the general consumer has no idea, and they'll go ahead and take all the default settings out of the box. And I've found, unfortunately, even within our own community, people aren't actually going ahead and making gold standards and turning off all this stuff. So this talk is actually going to cover, am I going to go ahead and trust the device? I'm going to talk about the issues with a lot of the specific OSs. I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about how we're going to go ahead and turn off these things. We'll go ahead and look at this as if we were actually being targeted. So in my previous talk, I was talking about tailored access operations in which the computers or devices that you have are actually intercepted before you get them, and they're shrink wrap items in which basically your device is compromised before you even got it. How do I go ahead and deal with that? We've also had numerous fails in which, well, Lenovo laptops, they're adding nice things for you that you really don't need, like Superfish, things like that. In other words, you really should go ahead and, even if you're a consumer or within an enterprise, make sure you wipe these things down, start fresh every time you get a chance. So, things that you have to go ahead and consider. You have to go ahead and consider, well, what cloud am I going to go ahead and use? If it's a mobile device, what carrier am I actually using? What apps do I actually use on any of the mobile devices, and do I trust them? I'm going to talk about the nice advances in mobile security, some of the failures, invasive operating system defaults, and I shouldn't have to answer this, but we willingly allow people to go ahead and have their invasive software, crapware built in the machines. So, yes, do we trust this? Bad privacy settings, SIM card security, iCloud fappening. You get your new device, so now what are you going to do? Now we clean. If you get an iOS device, any of the items, you should automatically go ahead and wipe it. By wiping it, you need to do what is known as a device firmware update, a DFU. Now, Jonathan Zdarsky has actually done a lot of research on this, and he says that if you do this 3 times, anything that was in there is nuked. My Co-presenter actually goes ahead and says, yeah, you do it 2 times, it's good enough. I'm paranoid, I do it 3. At best, whenever I have an Android device, unfortunately, they don't sign their software. So I don't really have an elegant solution to go ahead and clean that device. The best I can do is go ahead and wipe Davlit caches and do the factory reset. I'll go ahead and do that at least a few times and at least go ahead and wipe everything that I possibly can. The difficulty that we have between iOS and Android as far as dumping things is iOS, it's actually signed and it goes up against a digitally signed certificate. Android, they don't sign their software. This is kind of a problem when you want to go ahead and dump everything and then start over fresh and know that you actually have valid OEM spec software. On a Macintosh computer, which I happen to be using now, first thing you should do is nuke that sucker. It gets a little bit dicey in the fact that I have SSD, so I don't really want to be zeroing this thing out too many times, but David actually found a way around this. So EFI is basically GUID, and the extensible firmware interface allows me to go ahead and boot off of either a USB drive or a DVD external. What does that buy me? Well, basically what it buys me is the fact that I go ahead and I get to take a Windows or a Linux CD and wipe this disk clean. I'm actually not taking iOS. I'm actually taking another operating system, making sure I wipe this sucker clean, dumping everything off of it, and then from there, actually going ahead and having a restart from Apple, thus getting a fresh OS. Now, when I actually go ahead and take a Windows or Linux partitioning device and I wipe this drive clean, it actually removes the recovery partition. So one of the nice things is I don't even have to worry about a recovery partition being there with things that I don't know that are in there. My drive's clean. So we'll talk about your regular x86 computer. If you can, upgrade your hard drive to an SSD, a nice new fresh one. You can go ahead and zero that out before you even get started on that, and go ahead and create your standard GUID partition with your regular hard drive tools. The original talk was on the iOS privacy granularity. So iOS actually goes ahead and it allows you to have granularity on all these items. So first thing you're going to want to go ahead and do is you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that you go into your location services and get rid of items there. So simply, you go to privacy, go straight to location services, and you can actually go ahead and, like in the old BlackBerry days, assign permissions to each app. Why does Twitter need access to my GPS coordinates? Why does Evernote need access to my GPS coordinates? Well, I'm not going to go ahead and give it to them, but it's amazing how many people actually will take an app and just go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to allow everything. And they do give you dummy boxes to go ahead and say, allow this or not allow this. Most of the time when people are installing apps, they needed it yesterday so they don't pay attention to the little boxes. It's okay. This is where you go back to go ahead and fix that. At any given time, you can go ahead and go into an app's permissions and later revoke it. But wait, there's more. We now have iOS 9.02, and we now have new hardware. So one of the things that they went ahead and added in here is this whole thing called Spotlight Search. Sadly, I know you're not going to be able to see this, and I unfortunately didn't have enough time to add screenshots, but basically Spotlight Search gives you this, in which it knows about your contacts, it knows about what apps you use, and it integrates with maps because, yeah, you totally need to know these things. Well, on my phone it doesn't because I disabled the Bing web search results, and I actually disabled the Spotlight suggestions. If you don't disable Spotlight suggestions, it basically allows iOS and iCloud to communicate with each other, to actually go ahead and look at how you use your phone. What they wanted to go ahead and do is make it predictive so that at this time, I'm probably going to go take a drive in my car and go home. I probably want to go ahead and launch the Spotify app. I don't think they really need to know about my behaviors or patterns, so I'm not doing it. So, new to the actual iPhone 6S hardware, they have this thing called Live Photo. Great idea because it comes on by default. It's actually kind of a cool concept. I whip out my camera. It has this live photo mode. What this live photo mode does is it actually takes video and audio for 3 seconds before I actually go ahead and take the picture. What if I happen to be at a wedding and somebody's drunk and somebody does the selfie and talks crap about people? This is recorded forever. Not only that, it goes straight to the iCloud, and we already know I don't like the way they do their multi-factor authentication there. Yeah, those unforwarded comments and everything else could actually be embarrassing because you literally just have a 3-second hot mic here. So going back to the general privacy granularity, when does it ask you? When it needs access to the microphone, when it needs access to your contacts. So basically, you go ahead and you're going to have to deal with that in the settings and privacy if you go ahead and change your mind. There are some apps, unfortunately, that are built in to iOS inherently that you're not going to go ahead and change. Those would be your mail. Those would be your messages, iMessages. You have to take the default things that are built and hardwired into the OS. For everything else, you can go into the settings and privacy and go back into each app and say, well, let's go ahead and turn off location. Let's turn off microphone. Let's turn off contacts access. I already went ahead and glossed over this earlier saying about location privacy, but there are specific settings in there that you can go ahead and flag. So for location, it's important to always go ahead and if you don't ever want your GPS to be accessed, select never. So never means it's not going to go ahead and actually use GPS. My favorite one, which is a balance of, I think, reasonable things, is well using the app, because I don't want to say Uber never use my location because I actually need you to pick me up and this is useful, but I want to at least have them be able to find me. And then there's always, which is a pervasive one. Any app that always asks for always, I'm probably going to uninstall it. So basically, keep it simple. Either the app has access or it doesn't. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the privacy granularity. Siri and iCloud, they spy on you straight up unless you disable them. Location history is the equivalent to Google Maps location history, in which it gives you breadcrumbs of everywhere you've ever visited. Siri, well, you can go ahead and use it. You actually can go ahead and tell it, I only want you to go ahead and take my location, never, or while using it. Mine's set to never. And of course, your Safari history. But this actually gets to where I was talking about multiple devices. Safari history, Chrome browser, all these browsers think they're being helpful to you by allowing you to go ahead and seamlessly hand off the session that you were at when you were there before. So I'm looking at Safari on my phone. I was browsing this on my phone, turn on my Mac OS X, turn on my iPad. I'm looking at the same exact thing on all these devices. I think that's pretty creepy because I don't actually want to leave breadcrumbs of where I've been. Not only that, if I accidentally had bad security practices, never ever locked my desktop computer, and somebody had access to my desktop computer, they can see everything that I was doing. So how do you disable it? You turn it off. There are other things that you can do inside of the phone, which is change your advertising ID. I kind of tend to do this like once a month. But the advertising ID thing is really interesting because built into iOS, they actually went ahead and took your MAC address to make it a unique identifier. So when you're walking around with your Wi-Fi on and your Bluetooth beaconing on, apparently they've gone ahead and made it so that it gives this random advertising ID so it knows where you've been. It's kind of creepy. Those same people that make those Sensormatic tags for loss prevention have now started putting in beacons in stores to actually go ahead and look for your Bluetooth and talk back and forth to your phone as a prox item with a so-called unique ID. So reset that often. Make sure you go ahead and turn off your unused services. There was recently a security flaw, which is why 9.0.2 was introduced, in which basically if I was on the same network, it could cause an infection. You need to go ahead and turn off things like AirDrop and CarPlay if you're not using it. In fact, I don't care if it's iOS or Android. If you're not using a service, why do you leave it on? Even worse, we leave these services on actual enterprise machines and servers. Turn them off if you're not using them. The other thing that's the fatal flaw is when people set up their phones, they set up lock screens by default. What people don't realize is in iOS, if you don't turn off the control center notifications, I get to go ahead and read all your emails anyways, just as they go ahead and pop up. You need to go ahead and make sure that you limit Siri. They decided to be like Samsung and every other deal like Google Now, which is Hey Google and everything else, that this mic needs to be on. That's pretty bad. Basically, you say, Hey Siri, and then the iPhone mic is listening and should actually go ahead and activate Siri. Turn that off. It's another way that you're giving a person an attack vector if they have physical access to the phone. Now, once again, you have to remember, none of your devices are ever going to be secure. Once you actually lose physical access, you'll have to clean all over again every single time. So, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Android privacy granularity, or not. So, how do I go ahead and solve these issues that I was talking about before? Well, I don't really have the ability to. And once again, Viz is getting awesome press because I had this argument with him. He's using the 1+1 and they actually gave you granularity. But apparently if you turn off location services for Google Play, none of the rest of the apps work. So I guess you have to give Google your location no matter what. So how do I deal with this problem? I'm not going to root, because if I root and I accidentally leave my Wi-Fi on or my Bluetooth on, well, it makes it that much easier for my attacker to just grab my entire phone. One of the ways around this that we cleverly went ahead and did was go ahead and just grab the Android SDK. Every time I have an app and it has way too many invasive permissions like my location, I can go ahead and not grant that within the manifest. The Problem is I don't have time for this because I'm always on the road. So basically, if I'm messing with a manifest, I'm probably breaking the application, and this is going to take maybe 2 or 3 goes at it before I actually make the thing work the way I want it to work. And basically, your general consumer is never going to have a chance to even do this. They are addressing this in Marshmallow, in the new one, and they're going to go ahead and turn on the privacy options. Basically, the only way you're going to get this is buy a new device that is actually a Google Nexus-like device, and that's the only way you're going to have granularity into each app. Once again, the 1+1 on the cyanogen mod was brought up to me by Viz. It does do this. However, even all of the betas, Google Play will not allow you to disable location services. So, yeah, believe it or not, Google spies on you as well. They do it pretty much the same way Apple does it. The best I can go ahead and do is go into the applications drawer and look at every single app in there. So I tap the settings button, and this is what I get. I basically get, this is going to do what it's going to do, and I can't change any of this crap. I can't change any of that. It spies on you as well. So some other security researcher who I forgot to go ahead and quote because I've just redesigned these entire slides, basically has said, the difficulty is once you register any of your devices onto the cloud, you'll basically never be able to go ahead and confidently resell your phone without remnants of the data being there, ever. So things that you can go ahead and do to prevent things from spying on you is actually go to your account setting, which everybody should know, but once again, this is for the general consumer as well as us. You need to go ahead and at least turn off some of these things. This happens even on your machine, on the computer level when you use Chrome, and the fact that, oh, this will be convenient. If I'm opening up tabs in my browsers, this will go ahead and put it on every machine I've ever used. It's also an interesting attack vector, which I thought of, which is all I have to go ahead and do is if I hated someone, is make sure I log into Google Chrome and hopefully, and then close everything down and leave one of my Google Chrome sessions logged into my session pointing to a malware page, and when they launch Google Chrome under my profile, they'll go to the page that I visited that was hostile, but that's another story and another piece of research I was working on anyways. So it actually goes ahead and spies on you and takes very decent details of where you've traveled. I kind of thought it was cool because the first year I was consulting, it actually matched up how many miles and where I've been in the world and everything else. And you actually have to opt out of this and manually delete it. But once again, this has every device that I've ever synced with it. And I can't clean those devices out by nuking OSs because Android. And it gets better. On the OS level, we now have Windows 10. Windows 10 has Cortana. Windows 10 is basically, hey Siri or Google Now. It's constantly listening. So in your Windows settings, when you're going to go ahead and start from scratch, if you're dealing with either 8.1 or 10, the best way to defeat automatically getting the Microsoft OneDrive, Microsoft Cloud, Microsoft everything in there, go ahead and kill your internet connections and do it off of physical media. Otherwise, by default, all these things are going to be turned on. So in Windows, I'm going to go ahead and want to disable Cortana. I'm definitely not going to want to log into their Microsoft Cloud. And there's already another trusted thing you can go ahead and Google, which is called what should I block on my firewall for Windows 10 if I'm going to use it. You can literally just Google it by that. It's a ton of ACLs and a ton of things to go ahead and make sure there's no communication on. OS X isn't any better. It goes ahead and, once again, the way I defeat this when I turn on the machine is it's going to ask you to connect to the internet immediately. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to skip the step when it tells me, set up your Wi-Fi, because the first thing it's going to want to do is sign you up for its iCloud. If you accidentally do it, you can go ahead and unsign out later, but it tends to be a little bit persistent when you log into other things. And once you've actually set the damn thing up, it doesn't like going away. I would go ahead and I'd do an EFI clean, start with a fresh OS again. So ever since Yosemite's been around, it has this thing called Spotlight, just like they were adding to your phone. It wants to learn what you do on your computer and actually is going ahead and tracking what you do on the computer. All the way down to keystrokes anytime you go ahead and hit the Apple spacebar just to go ahead and find indexed items on my hard drive. Now, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I do searches, I like hitting the Apple spacebar and just typing in the app I want to do so I don't have to mouse around. Windows 10, basically, it doesn't have Spotlight, but it has the Windows search. Unless you turn off Windows 10 search, it's doing the same thing. For purposes of helping you, it's indexing and grabbing all the key logs of everything you're typing into Spotlight so that it can learn about you and be that much more helpful. That's kind of a bad thing. And what if I'm like typing in embarrassing things like the names of porn or something? It's going to actually go through an analysis in an iCloud or Microsoft's Bing or Microsoft's cloud. And it's probably going to keep a history, even though they say we use anonymizers to go ahead and anonymize your data. But how do they anonymize the data? Because all they really need is a single IP. So to go ahead and get rid of this in OS X, make sure that you actually use Spotlight to kill this damn thing, which is hit the Apple key in the spacebar and type in Spotlight. It makes no freaking sense. You can't find it when you go to the general settings, but when you do, it's definitely going to be there. So once you get to those settings, you need to, once again, it's at the very bottom, uncheck the Allow Spotlight Suggestions and get rid of Bing. For some reason, Microsoft Bing and Apple have just decided to get together with each other. And whenever I have to disable iCloud, I have to disable Bing. So it's Cortana all over again, even though I didn't even buy a Microsoft product. Other things you have to go ahead and do is they have privacy default settings inside the Mac. Once again, get rid of the Send Diagnostic. They don't really need all my crash dumps. Crash dump data has pretty cool stuff in it, like my location or what it is that I was typing or doing. You have to get rid of that on the phone as well. I don't really like to go ahead and share the crash dumps because they just have way too much information. So not even Linux is sacred anymore. Ubuntu. It left and decided, hey, if all these guys are doing these analytics on our users, we should too. Problem is, if you're going to be a consumer and you're going to go the Linux route, you're probably going to go with Ubuntu because you don't know any better. I mean, Ubuntu basically is like Windows, even acts like it, and it comes with this piece of crap called Unity Desktop that is installed by default, because most consumer users are not going to go ahead and either go ahead and remove this and put GNOME or KDE in it. They're going to take the default build and they're going to say, I'm going to use this Unity Desktop. It sounds pretty cool. Well, they're not in bed with Microsoft. This time I don't have to disable Bing. So, why does it search the web by default? So basically, once again, anytime I'm searching for an index on Unity Desktop, it's automatically going out to Google to do a search, or it's looking through my index of files on my hard drive. So, how do I go ahead and disable it? Yeah, I don't. I have to uninstall it and put a real desktop environment on it. Supposedly, you can go into the Unity tweak tool, and then you have to go ahead and run an apt package just to go ahead and undo the tweak tool. But once again, usually your general consumer isn't going to go ahead and even be that advanced or even realize what it's doing. So we have to go ahead and then ask, well, damn, everything connects me to the cloud. Everything connects me to the internet. I'm not going to escape this, am I? So, unfortunately, we do have to choose things. Google, they make money from targeted advertising. How do I get a better idea as to, well, figure out you? I need to know what apps you're running. I need to go ahead and keep grabbing everything I know about you to push this targeted advertising at you by reading your Gmails and everything else. iCloud, they want you to pay for it. They take your money. They give you the first 5 gig free. The problem that I have with this is they've had issues before. I don't like what they deem to be multi-factor authentication. A text message is not a multi-factor authentication. Google got this right. They built their authenticator. Microsoft, they're new to this space. It just seems that Bing and Cortana are the evil assholes of the bunch, but we're going to go ahead and allow them to do things. I'm actually using Outlook these days because they took Google's authenticator, and I don't get all the weird ads and all the other crap that Gmail has been actually sending at me, and it doesn't feel as invasive. Honestly, it's just because this is consumer email, and I just can't seem to go ahead and get away from it. If you're really going to be serious about secure email, you're going to actually use an email client, and PGP or GPGP. And the problem is as much as I'd like to go ahead and build my keys and give them to other people, nobody else can be bothered to actually go ahead and use them. So if I encrypt it, nobody's going to read the message because they don't have time or don't know how. Box, they actually go ahead and take your money. They also allow for multi-factor authentication. If I have to store and drop stuff around, they're pretty good. Other factors we have to get back to is, well, we're stuck with carriers. Now, everybody knows that when we use a device, they were actually proxying all your traffic and using a super cookie. Or at least if you didn't know, you need to know that. And a lot of us in the security community and privacy community went ahead and bitched about it on Twitter and wrote these people a lot of hate mail. Verizon now allows you to go ahead and opt out of the super cookie and them going ahead and proxying. Unfortunately, AT&T went back to going ahead and actually middling your traffic, and we don't know if they're ever going to allow you to go ahead and opt out. So when you go ahead and choose your actual devices, you need to actually take a look at the track record of who's actually providing you your transport. Honestly, none of this really matters because if you're smart enough anyways, you're going to go ahead and use a VPN. VPNs are easy enough to go ahead and set up in both Android and iOS, and you're no longer using your carrier's internet. Back when I couldn't opt out, well, should I trust my carrier anyway? Probably not, and hell no. So I actually use 2 VPNs myself. Ace VPN, usually for pen testing. But the problem that I found out when I've been on the road and actually need to use VPN for a legitimate purpose because I'm in Canada or in Europe, that Ace VPN is so dirty and blacklisted, it's of no use to me to even do any banking or anything else, even though it's me. So I had to go ahead and find a pretty anonymous one that was for general use, and I chose private internet access. Davo, who had to go ahead and set up things for people who are less sophisticated, truly consumers, uses Viper VPN. The reason why he uses it is it has a very dumb client. That dumb client actually allows people to go ahead and just launch an app, and all of a sudden I have a VPN. I say I can go ahead and teach people just to go ahead and go into network, do a few more clicks, and then turn on their VPN. But it all depends on, the end user. How well are they going to be versed at using these things? For privacy, I go ahead and I've actually gone through quite a few different apps for enhanced privacy. I'm using Signal. For your Android, you should be using Redphone or Secure Text. These are all known to most of our community, and I'm telling you this and speaking to people who already know this stuff. One of the things that I found to be interesting was Burner. And Burner's pretty good because we all have these occasional, I need to go ahead and move into a new apartment. I really don't want to give people a actual cell phone number. It's been actually helpful for things like I need an apartment, and it also gives me a layer of privacy. Or if I'm dating someone and I just don't know them well enough, you can go ahead and use that. Burner basically is a virtual phone inside of either iOS or Android, and it actually came to the scale of economies in which, it's still cheaper than buying a track phone and one last thing I have to carry around. I like iMessage right now, and I like iMessage because it's pissing off the Fed. So as soon as the FBI and everybody else says we have to go ahead and tell Apple that we need access to the encryption in iMessage, and they keep telling them it's not possible, that's a canary to watch. Everything should use multi-factor authentication, and for that I use Google Authenticator. So we'll go ahead and talk about the good and the bad. It became apparent to me that I needed to go ahead and eventually ditch my BlackBerry, which I held on for dear life forever. And the advances were Android finally gave me full device encryption, and they did that in Lollipop. They also did full SD card decryption. Yeah, some of you are going, what the hell is that? Because they don't even give you that option anymore. So in iOS 7, it was hardware-based encryption, but it wasn't full device encryption. When 8 came around, that's about the time I decided to go ahead and switch. Now iOS 9 forces you to use a whole 6 digits for your PIN, but a PIN's pretty much a bad idea. Android, well, they forced a longer passcode, but they have a slight problem with you using a full passcode right now, in which somebody figured out a bypass, and it's a fun thing to read about. So back to the lousy 6 digits or the pattern unlock, because until they actually fix that exploit for the long passcode, we're not going to go ahead and be able to effectively use passcodes till they fix that. Supposedly it's been fixed. One of the biggest exploits is Android is carrier-based. I can't go ahead and get an upgrade and update from iOS unless the carrier says it's okay. For iOS, Apple actually told them, no, we're not going to go ahead and play with what the carrier allows me to do. We're going to go ahead and push software updates. So at least I have a little bit more security built in for security updates, which is, hey, at least I can go ahead and choose to update my device. Fails. Android Lollipop basically doesn't turn encryption on out of the box. iOS does. They fixed the 4-digit pin out of the box. Somebody must have listened to my talk the last time I gave it. Android App Store, they have a handful of applications that are vulnerable to Freak, OpenSSL, and TLS issues. iOS 8 was finally fixed with 9. The complex password bug was an issue and needs to be addressed. And essentially, well, what we have is a security and a series of massive fails. But what's even scarier is even if I go ahead and secure my device, I wipe, I clean, I do all this stuff. There was this whole thing where Gemalto, the entire SIM card plant, it's compromised. So once again, everybody has the keys to the known SIM cards. So I'm pretty much screwed anyways if you want to go ahead and do something to me. Therefore, yeah, think about your carrier. Think about the device you're going to get. Think about how you're going to configure it. How did this happen? Well, a lot of you guys aren't consumers. You guys are security people. And we let this happen. Basically, people went ahead and developed these to not be secure. Yeah, we didn't stop it. We've never reviewed it. We allowed developers to turn on all these invasive things by default, where we should actually go ahead and say, these are features, you need to turn them on. As a dead Kennedy said, give me convenience or give me death. That's what really happened here. We'll turn on all this shit. So, the informed conclusion, check your settings, clean. Most of us go to other conferences. I think DEF CON's an awesome time to reimage all my shit. So whoever had everything on me basically loses their trail because I'm wiping and cleaning everything or replacing hardware right after DEF CON. So that's my annual purge. So you need to go ahead and be mindful of logging into the cloud. That includes browsers, your Safari, your Chrome, anything that actually goes ahead and requires a login. If you can, one of the settings I do for every browsing is private mode isn't good enough. Screw private mode because all it does is not remember things, but it still keeps your cookies. It still keeps everything else. You need to go ahead and say, wipe this damn thing every time I'm done. If you're really, really paranoid, you're going to go ahead and build a VM, a new one every time, and use that for browsing and never ever touch your host OS, but that's just plain not practical, and I'm really not doing anything that anybody should really care about. Use a VPN. VPNs allow me to change location. So even though I'm here, my traffic says I'm still coming from LA. When I'm in LA, my traffic says it's coming from New York. Learn about your operating system. Whenever they do these point releases, just go to the what's new. What you really want to go ahead and look for is all the EULA and the things that are buried at the very, 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 very bottom of the documentation saying this is here to help you. Anytime anything's in there saying new improved feature, I'm probably going to want to turn it off because I don't understand what the hell it's doing. And if you don't understand what the hell it's doing, turn it off anyways, because if you don't miss it, it probably doesn't need to be on. So, once again, when you get a new Mac computer, wipe it. We need to clean. When you get a new Windows box, we need to clean. Make sure that you go ahead and turn off your internet connections. Do not enable your Wi-Fi. Unplug your Ethernet, and basically you're going to be fine. A lot of those invasive Cortana services and the key logging and everything else don't turn on by default because it never ever could when you don't have when you don't actually have the cloud setting everything up for you. This whole thing about Windows 10 sharing your Wi-Fi password and SSID to contacts that you have, it can't happen if you're not signed into the cloud. So it was a controversy, but the thing of it is when you actually use iCloud, every time you turn on a device, it memorizes your Wi-Fi settings, so it's also in the cloud. So everybody's doing this. If you are going to go ahead and back up your iOS device, make sure you go ahead and turn it off. Don't use a cloud. Actually use a computer that you left at home and back it up there and turn on the encryption, because at least they don't have the ability to take my computer that I have now and steal the encryption key off of this until they actually go ahead and raid my house at home, and you're going to need a warrant for that. So while I'm traveling, never have any devices, either Android or iOS, paired with your computer, because it actually did a key exchange. So, and if I don't have anything in the cloud, well, you can't get to it. So you're not going to get my backups, you're not going to get my keys, you're not going to get jack off of me, not without a warrant. So, the paranoid conclusion: throw away your smartphone, get your tinfoil hat out, install a Faraday cage, never leave outdoors. Basically, everything that I've talked about should be good enough to go ahead and make sure that you throw off something that may be invasive, that somebody would try to go ahead and plant on you. You're not going to go ahead and defeat a nation state. So you have to actually know the actor who's trying to go ahead and attack you. But by changing so many things up all the time, I'm definitely going to piss off advertisers. I'm definitely not going to let Bing into my life. I'm definitely not letting all this cloud crap get in the way. So I guess my advertising just won't be that relevant to me. But then again, oh crap, Amazon, so they have a dossier on me anyways. So, any questions? Yes. So here's the deal. It's actually closed. And because it's been closed, and because they actually charge you for it, once again, the general consumer isn't going to actually access something like that. Now, they did have their own problems too, in which they did have a compromise with the key system, and it left everything in the clear. I'm thinking that with Signal, Redphone, and Secure Text, that should be just as good, and I have it for free. Honestly, once again, what is it that I'm protecting against? The casual snooper. I don't even know that Silent Circle would be good enough against a nation state due to the fact that they have unlimited amount of resources, and anybody with an infinite amount of resources basically can go ahead and get it. They probably can go ahead and just kidnap you anyways and grab you and rubber hose technique it out of you. So once again, you have to think about your threat vector and what it is that you're trying to defend against. Anyone else? Alrighty, thank you.